when masters clash, one wrong move is enough to lose the entire game. When you are still testing the waters on the first level with clever tricks, your opponent has already reached the third, or even the fifth level, predicting every possible escape you might take. That fatal shot just now tells us one thing. A true top-tier hunter never relies on marksmanship alone to kill. And this duel between two godlike snipers took place inside the most brutal meat grinder in human history, Stalingrad. In 1942, the German and Soviet forces committed nearly 5 million troops here, fighting a decisive battle that would shape the fate of the world. On this scorched land, a human life could be worth less than a single bullet. A soldier's average survival time was measured not in days, but in hours. Surviving 24 hours here was considered a miracle. If you miraculously held on for 3 days, then congratulations, you were already qualified to be appointed as a regimental commander. Yet within these ruins, where even the air was soaked with the smell of blood, a Soviet political officer forged a weapon stronger than steel and more penetrating than bullets. It could not be seen or touched, yet it gave those labeled as expendable cannon fodder the courage to challenge death itself. That weapon was hope. In 1942, Nazi Germany's iron war machine had swept across Europe, stretching its claws toward the very heart of the Soviet Union, Stalingrad. This city, named after the nation's leader, became the final barrier standing in the way of the Nazis. Vasily answered his country's call and threw himself into this merciless defensive battle without hesitation. Like tens of thousands of new recruits, he was crammed into a sealed, overcrowded military transport train. On those young and inexperienced faces, confusion about the future mixed with raw fear of the battlefield. The train's final destination was the banks of the Volga River. When the doors were yanked open, the sight before them left everyone utterly speechless. Across the river, Stalingrad was engulfed in flames, thick smoke rising like a massive black curtain that swallowed the entire city. The air was filled with the choking stench of gunpowder and the presence of death. Before they could recover from the shock, officers roughly shoved them off the train and forced them onto transport boats crossing the Volga. An officer grabbed a loudspeaker, trying to deliver one last pre-battle speech, but his voice was quickly drowned out by the piercing screams of German Stuka dive bombers. Shells rained down like a storm, exploding into towering columns of water around the convoy. Countless small boats were torn apart in an instant. Young soldiers sank into the freezing river along with the shattered wreckage, never even setting foot on the battlefield. Machine gun fire poured down like a violent downpour, and the boats were instantly filled with screams and devoured the reason of some recruits, and they leapt into the river in a desperate attempt to escape. What awaited them, however, were the merciless bullets of the rear-line enforcement officers. Under the Soviet Union's ruthless military discipline, deserters were treated no differently from traitors and were executed on the spot. Amid the storm of bullets and explosions, Vasily's boat somehow made it to shore, but for those who survived, their nightmare was only just beginning. After climbing ashore over the bodies of their fallen comrades, they were thrown into a chaotic weapon distribution.
Rifles shoot! 1 out of 2 gets a rifle, one without follows him! When the one with a rifle gets killed, the one who is following picks up the rifle and shoots!
Due to severe equipment shortages, 2 soldiers were issued only 1 rifle. The man with the rifle charged first, while the unarmed followed behind, and when the one in front was killed, the man behind picked up the rifle and kept advancing, lost in the crush and noise. The unlucky Vasily was not given a rifle, and the only weapons in his hands were 5 cold 7.62mm rifle rounds. As the sharp sound of the charge whistle cut across the battlefield, Vasily and countless comrades just like him, shouting "Ura!" launched a charge toward the German positions that was almost certain death. Waiting for them was the fully prepared steel defensive line of the German army. The MG-42 heavy machine gun, known as Hitler's buzzsaw, spewed an impenetrable wall of fire, while heavy artillery and tanks roared with earth-shaking force. Living men fell in waves under the hail of bullets, cut down like wheat at harvest. Vasily locked his eyes on a comrade carrying a rifle ahead of him, and when that man was struck and collapsed, he rushed forward to grab the life-saving weapon, only to be beaten to it by someone faster at his side. The overwhelming disparity in strength made the charge completely meaningless, and the soldier's fighting spirit was quickly replaced by despair. Someone began shouting for a retreat, and the remaining soldiers scattered in panic, fleeing back toward where they had come from. However, behind them, a line of Soviet Maxim heavy machine guns had already been set up. The officers in command aimed their weapons at their own countrymen, shouting that cowards would be shot on sight. Dense gunfire erupted once again, and the soldiers who had narrowly escaped German bullets ultimately fell on their own side's positions. In this merciless war, moving forward meant death, and retreating meant death as well, and Vasily chose to play dead. On the smoke-filled battlefield, corpses lay everywhere, when a Soviet propaganda truck attempted to break through the German blockade, only to be flipped over by the shockwave of an explosion. A political officer named Commissar painfully crawled out of the wreckage and staggered into a flower bed piled with dead bodies. Before long, German tanks slowly rolled in and began clearing the battlefield, spraying machine gun fire into the corpses to ensure there were no survivors. Bullets slammed mercilessly into the bodies beside Commissar, producing dull, heavy thuds. He clenched his teeth tightly, not daring to make the slightest movement. After the Germans left, Commissar did not choose to flee. He pulled a rifle from the hands of a corpse and tremblingly aimed it at a German officer not far away who was changing equipment, perhaps out of a soldier's duty, or perhaps with the resolve to die. He prepared for one final act of resistance.
Get his coat.
It was Vasily who warned the political officer that firing like this was far too dangerous and would instantly expose their position, but Commissar, already resolved to die, ignored him. Yet when he pulled the trigger, all he heard was a click. The rifle was empty. Seeing this, Vasily quickly crawled over, took out the 5 precious bullets he carried on his body, smoothly took the rifle, loaded the rounds into the magazine, and handed it back to Commissar. Commissar raised the rifle again, but due to nerves and lack of experience, he hesitated and did not dare to fire.
Which one do you think I should aim at first? You should wait till there's an explosion.
Staring at the enemies in the distance, the arms of this civilian political officer began to tremble uncontrollably. He turned his head and asked Vasily,
"Did you notice you? A little."
At that moment, another jeep arrived on the opposite side. Several German soldiers jumped out, and the situation became even more complicated. One of the soldiers cautiously walked toward the flower bed where they were hiding. Through the drainage hole beneath the flower bed, Vasily calmly observed the 5 targets in the distance. As a distant roar of artillery thundered across the battlefield, he decisively pulled the trigger.
Quadra kill! Pentakill!
5 bullets, 5 lives, not a single shot missed. Beside him, Commissar was completely stunned by this almost supernatural marksmanship. He stared in disbelief at this unknown recruit, then reached out and gripped Vasily's hand tightly. At the same time, the Soviet frontline commander, suffering repeated defeats, was being harshly reprimanded by an envoy sent from Moscow. Khrushchev, with tears streaming down his face, the commander defended himself, saying the Germans had planes and artillery, while his men did not even have rifles. Khrushchev remained unmoved, handed him a pistol, and turned away. Understanding the message, the commander swallowed the gun in tears and ended his own life. In this suffocating atmosphere, Khrushchev needed a way to reverse the decline and boost morale. At this moment, Commissar stepped forward and offered his suggestion.
Give them hope.
He believed that instead of forcing soldiers onto the battlefield through fear, it was better to give them an example, a living hero. He told Khrushchev the story of Vasily killing 5 German soldiers with 5 bullets, fighting alone. He proposed that the army newspaper must be republished to tell soldiers inspiring stories, praising sacrifice and bravery, creating heroes on the battlefield, and igniting their desire to fight for the motherland. Khrushchev greatly praised the idea and immediately approved the plan. Before long, copies of the Red Star newspaper, printed with Vasily's photograph and heroic deeds, spread across the entire Soviet Union. Vasily, once an unknown recruit who nearly became cannon fodder, suddenly rose to become a nationally celebrated war hero. Commissar was promoted to lieutenant general and entered the general staff, and Vasily, as he had hoped, was transferred into the sniper division, beginning his legendary career. Under Commissar's careful promotion and Vasily's own extraordinary talent, his combat record continued to grow. The number of German officers and soldiers killed by his rifle multiplied again and again. He became a role model for soldiers. His name turned into a symbol of victory, and the people took pride in him. Among them was a boy named Sasha. Sasha and his mother revered Vasily like a god and warmly invited him into their home as a guest. It was also here that Vasily encountered the beautiful female soldier Tanya. Tanya was an outstanding student from Moscow University, fluent in German, who joined the army because of the war. Her arrival was like a beam of light shining into the worlds of Vasily and Commissar. Both men developed feelings for her, and this delicate love triangle planted the seeds of conflict for what was to come. Vasily's rapidly rising fame was like a sharp blade, cutting deeply into the nerves of the German command. To remove this thorn and restore German morale, the Germans summoned their top sniper from Berlin, Major König. König was the head of Germany's sniper school, highly experienced, exceptionally skilled, and more importantly, a master of sniper psychology. He came to Stalingrad not only to complete his mission, but also for a personal reason. His son had recently fallen on this very land. He wanted to see with his own eyes the battlefield where his son had fallen, and put an end to the sniper myth created by that Soviet. A peak showdown between two aces began from this moment on. In his view, a true hunter never chases prey, but lays traps and waits for it to walk in on its own. König soon revealed just how terrifying he was as a hunter. He successively sniped several Soviet officers and machine gunners, luring Vasily into a battlefield of his choosing, an abandoned department store. A Soviet observation post reported König's position, and Vasily rushed in with confidence, landing a shot on the target. However, when he and his assistant risked crossing the fire line and entered the building, they discovered that what he had hit was only a dummy dressed in a German uniform.
It's a trap.
Vasily instantly realized the danger. A cigarette but on the ground, still warm, told him that the deadly enemy was nearby. König had already relocated behind a concealed wardrobe, his rifle locking down their only escape route. At that moment, German bombers began a carpet bombing of the area. The violent explosions made the entire building shake as if it were about to collapse. Vasily's assistant was completely broken by fear, and despite Vasily's warnings, he panicked and ran toward the stairwell. With a single gunshot, König completed a textbook-perfect ambush. Using the dust and smoke thrown up by the explosions, Vasily narrowly escaped death. In the first encounter, Vasily was utterly defeated. He came to realize that his opponent was not only deadly accurate, but also a master of psychological warfare, with experience and composure far beyond his own. To assist Vasily, Soviet command assigned him a new partner, Kulikov. He had once been a student of König at the German sniper school and was thoroughly familiar with his teacher's tactical style. Commissar believed that with Kulikov's help, König could surely be defeated. The next day, Vasily, Kulikov, and another spotter infiltrated deep into German territory once again. This time, they decided to take the initiative. With a precise shot, Vasily severed a German telephone line 160 meters away, using it to draw the enemy out. As expected, the Germans sent a repairman, who was shot dead by the waiting Kulikov. When the news reached König, he immediately saw through this amateur tactic. He captured a Soviet prisoner and forced him to put on a German uniform and go repair the phone line. Unaware of the truth, Kulikov fired again and killed his own countryman. That single shot also completely exposed their approximate position. Kulikov attempted the traditional trick of raising a helmet to probe König's location, but in König's eyes, it was nothing more than a clumsy performance. Not only did he refuse to fire, he instead analyzed their behavior patterns, accurately predicted the route they would use to retreat, and aimed his rifle there. Seeing that the bait had failed, Kulikov concluded that König was not nearby, lowered his guard, and prepared to withdraw with Vasily.
Don't you think that was strange? That last one. They sent him out to get shot like the others. It's not natural.
Oh no, I'm the one who was stupid. They don't give a shit about telephone guys.
At the moment he leapt over a broken wall, König's bullet precisely pierced his skull. Staring at his fallen comrade whose eyes remained open, Vasily felt a bone-deep chill and fear for the first time. The string of failures dealt Vasily a heavy blow, and Commissar was also under immense pressure from his superiors. He revealed to Vasily that he had already planted a spy at König's side. The young boy Sasha, Using his identity as a child and his job-shining shoes, Sasha got close to König and passed on intelligence. At the same time, the bond between Vasily and Tanya grew deeper amid the flames of war. Tanya told Vasily about how her parents were brutally killed by German soldiers, which strengthened her resolve to fight on the front lines. Vasily handed Kulikov's rifle to her, acknowledging her right to fight alongside him. All of this filled Commissar, who deeply loved Tanya, with burning jealousy and rage. Based on the intelligence provided by Sasha, Vasily learned that König would set an ambush the next day in a pipeline near the tractor factory. This was a double trap. Commissar had Sasha deliberately leak false information, while Vasily planned to circle around through another pipeline to strike König from behind. However, they still underestimated the vigilance of this sniper god. As Vasily and his assistant crawled through the pipeline, slight vibrations and falling dirt immediately alerted König to something unusual. He made a decisive call, abandoning his original ambush point and swiftly relocating to the pipeline's exit. The moment Vasily crawled out of the pipe, he never imagined that he had once again stepped straight into his enemy's trap. A gunshot rang out. His assistant was hit in the shoulder, and Vasily's Mosin Nagant rifle was blasted out of his hands. He was pinned down behind an abandoned blast furnace. He tried to hook his rifle back with a rope tied to a knife, but just as he was about to succeed, König fired a single shot that severed the rope and completely shattered his hope. At this moment of despair, a bomber flew overhead, shattering the glass in the building's roof. A massive shard of glass fell not far from Vasily, clearly reflecting his panicked face right into König's eyes. At the same time, Vasily also used this mirror to pinpoint his enemy's exact position. The wounded assistant ran back to camp for help, and when Tanya learned what had happened, she rushed into the battlefield without hesitation. She crawled out of the pipeline and appeared in Vasily's line of sight. Through the change in Vasily's expression, König also realized that reinforcements had arrived. Vasily made a split-second decision, telling Tanya to find another large piece of glass and, at his signal, use its reflection to disrupt König's vision.
Are you ready?
Yes.
3, 2, 1.
The intense glare stabbed through the scope into König's eyes, and in the instant he reflexively closed them. Vasily seized the chance and shot, wounding König's left hand. This time, Vasily won. This was not just a victory of marksmanship, but a triumph of intelligence, courage, and trust. Tanya's arrival became the decisive variable in this duel. Having escaped death together, Vasily and Tanya confirmed their love amid the flames of war. In a crude barracks, surrounded by the snores of their comrades, they held each other tightly. This brief moment of tenderness was the only comfort on this brutal land. However, their love ignited the flames of jealousy deep within Commissar's heart. Commissar, the political officer who had personally shaped Vasily into a hero, realized that both on the battlefield and in love, he had lost to the very creation of his own hands. Watching the affection Tanya showed Vasily, and feeling his own growing isolation, the balance in his heart completely collapsed. Blinded by jealousy, Commissar began to slander Vasily in his reports, accusing him of avoiding combat and undermining morale. More fatally, he used Sasha to leak false intelligence to König, claiming that Vasily would be setting an ambush at the chemical plant. He intended to eliminate this rival through König's hands. König also confirmed through his conversations with Sasha that the boy was a Soviet spy. He decided to play along, telling Sasha that he would ambush Vasily at the train station. In reality, his true goal was to use Sasha as bait and bring this duel to a final end. When Sasha went to see König again, what awaited him was no longer chocolate and canned food, but a cold noose. König hung Sasha's body from a water pipe at the train station. It was a cruel signal, and an ultimate trap. Seeing Sasha's horrific fate, Tanya collapsed instantly, and as she and Commissar escorted Sasha's mother away from the docks, German artillery struck. Tanya was critically wounded, her fate uncertain, and she was sent to a rear hospital. Witnessing all of this, Commissar finally awakened in remorse and despair. He lost his friendship, lost his love, and lost his political future. He crawled to Vasily, who was confronting König at the train station, and told him the news of Tanya's death. Then he made his final decision.
I want to help you, Vasily. Let me do one last thing. Something useful for a change. Let me show you where the Major is. No, don't do that.
König shot this opponent, yet he could not believe the victory had come so easily. He cautiously stepped out from cover, wanting to personally confirm Vasily's body. He moved closer step by step, but a sniper's instinct made him stop. A chill ran through him as he slowly turned his eyes. To his side, Vasily was calmly aiming his rifle at him. König knew he had lost. In the final moment of his life, he felt a strange sense of release. He slowly removed his military cap and paid his last respect to a worthy opponent. A single gunshot rang out, and the legend of Germany's sniper god came to an end in the filthy water of Stalingrad. War brings nothing but destruction and pain. As time passed, the Soviet army reversed the course of the battle. In February 1943, the Battle of Stalingrad ended with a final Soviet victory, becoming a major turning point in the Second World War. At this point, the film comes to an end. Enemy at the Gates is without doubt an outstanding war film. It successfully tells a deeply dramatic character-driven story against an epic historical backdrop. Director Jean-Jacques Annaud demonstrates masterful control of scale and tension, whether in the horrific river crossing on the Volga or the sniper standoffs among the ruins of Stalingrad, creating an immersive sense of pressure and realism. The film's first profound message lies in its deconstruction and redefinition of the concept of the hero. At the beginning of the story, Vasily is not a born hero. He is merely expendable cannon fodder in the war machine, a soldier who could not even be issued a rifle. The birth of a hero requires a discoverer and an amplifier. Commissar was that sharp-eyed discoverer, because on a battlefield littered with corpses, what he saw was not just a crack shot, but a symbol capable of igniting hope across an entire nation. So the propaganda machine, this powerful amplifier, began operating at full capacity. The front-page headlines of Red Star and the heroic stories spread nationwide, quickly transformed Vasily from a flesh-and-blood soldier into an invincible war myth with a will of steel. This process makes us understand that heroes in war are often a fusion of talent and circumstance, and even more so a joint creation of the individual and collective narrative. The collective needs an idol to anchor faith and dispel fear, and Vasily happened to become that vessel. But the film's true depth lies in the fact that it does not stop at praise, but reveals the price of becoming a symbol. Once Vasily was placed on a pedestal, he lost the right to be an ordinary person. He could not be afraid, he could not fail, and he could not even love freely. What he carried was no longer just his own life, but the expectations and beliefs of countless people. This weight nearly crushed him. It forces us to reflect that in any era, when we look up to heroes placed under the spotlight, should we also see the immense pressure and struggle they endure as ordinary people? Beneath the halo of heroism is often a mortal soul that can grow weary and feel fear. In most war films, the line between good and evil is clearly drawn, but Enemy at the Gates gives us a deeply compelling opponent, the German sniper Master Major König. He is not a fanatical extremist, but a calm and professional figure, even carrying a trace of aristocratic elegance. Like an artist, his existence completely overturns the simplistic narrative that the enemy must be a monster. König is a mirror to Vasily. Both possess patience and intelligence beyond ordinary men, and both regard sniping as an art rather than mere killing. Their confrontation is more like a match between two elite chess players on a board of death, filled with intellectual calculation and psychological confrontation. Through their repeated clashes, the film allows us to see the shared nature of humanity. König comes to Stalingrad not only to serve his country, but also to mourn his son. This deeply human emotional motive instantly draws him closer to the audience. The most climactic moment comes when König calmly removes his cap at the end of his life. In that instant, there is no longer national hatred between him and Vasily, only mutual respect after a contest between masters. This is a form of respect that transcends sides and belongs solely to professionals. This scene allows us to profoundly understand that the absurdity of war lies in forcing exceptional individuals, who might otherwise have been friends or rivals, to destroy each other for hollow grand narratives. What we hate is war itself, not the person on the other side of the scope, who like you as a family, emotions, and dignity, but is unfortunate enough to stand there. By humanizing the enemy, the film delivers its deepest anti-war message. The true enemy is the war that fuels hatred and division. If Vasily and König represent a clash of light and shadow, then Commissar's story is the film's most complex and heartbreaking human tragedy, and also its most profound lesson. As the creator of the hero myths surrounding Vasily, Commissar's original intention was pure: to give people hope. He was an idealistic and capable political officer. However, when the hero he personally created not only surpassed him on the battlefield, but also won the heart of the woman he loved, his inner world collapsed completely. Commissar's tragedy stems from his inability to separate the symbol from the individual. He fell in love with the halo of his own creation and tried to claim it as his own. When he failed, jealousy, like a carving blade of human nature, transformed him from an idealist into a dark destroyer. He attempted to use the enemy's hand to destroy his own creation. This was not only a betrayal of Vasily, but a total betrayal of his original ideals. Yet the film does not let him sink endlessly. After witnessing Sasha's horrific death and Tanya's severe injury, Commissar finally awakens in remorse. With his final act, he completes his self-redemption. He stands up and uses his own body to create the winning opportunity for Vasily. In that moment, he is no longer a jealous political officer, but a soldier who has returned to his original purpose. Commissar's story is a warning bell. It tells us that even the noblest ideals, once bound to personal desire and jealousy, can lead to destruction. True greatness does not lie in never making mistakes, but in having the courage to confront one's darkness after losing the way, and to complete final redemption through action. Enemy at the Gates offers us far more than a visual spectacle. Like a calm anatomist, it dissects layer by layer. Amid the ruins of Stalingrad, the making of heroes, the nature of enemies, and the many facets of human nature, what we gain is a deeper understanding of war, a clearer awareness of human complexity, and a heavy, enduring reflection on peace and dignity.